Hi, my name is Brittany and I make snails. And in this video, as you've probably seen from the title, I am going to be making some Phantom of the Opera snails. I decided right off the bat that I really wanted to do the iconic boat scene, so I have some balsa wood sheets here that I'm going to use for the kind of base structure of our boat. Balsa wood is very lightweight and very flexible. It's super easy to cut and work with as long as you don't need it to be like super load bearing, but snails are small and it's going to have a lot of clay structure built up around it as well, so it'll be plenty sturdy for our guys to take their little trip down the weird catacomb. What is that anyway? Is that like surely it's not like the sewers of the opera house, right? I mean, we're not going to think too much about it. Anyways, I cut the shape that I wanted for the base of the boat and did a little sanding. Next, I'm going to use some of that wonderful, lovely, super handy dandy polymer clay adhesive that I like to use to go all the way around the perimeter of the kind of base boat shape. That way my polymer clay gets really good adhesion and really kind of sinks into the little fibers of the wood so that it's, you know, we don't get any weird cracking or separation once things bake. For the walls of the boat, I just kind of sloppily rolled out some thick slabs of clay. I am not a professional boat builder. I don't really know very much about boats, but I used reference images from the movie version and just kind of tried to get it looking as close as possible. But you'll see as I make this boat that it goes through some pretty, I don't know, some pretty big changes as I try to adjust things and get it looking as close as possible. For now, I'm just going to kind of make the base shapes for each of the walls and make sure that those are really firmly and securely attached to the clay adhesive and the wood underneath. I want to make sure that there's no little cracks and crevices. We can't have our boat leaking and our snails getting questionable liquids all over their fancy garments. But yeah, so a lot of smoothing, a lot of just kind of smooshing and combining and making sure that everything is, you know, just kind of the base general sort of shape. I like to kind of work very broadly and kind of general with the basic shapes of things, and then kind of gradually refine and get things a little bit cleaner as we go. Of course, I can only get things so smooth with just my fingers, so once I'm happy enough with the shape, I went ahead and baked it to lock it in, and then I'm going to take some sandpaper to just, you know, get things a little extra smooth, get rid of some of those little lumps and bumps that just are gonna happen. At this point, I can kind of further refine that shape, re-examine my reference images and see what changes I need to make. I definitely need to extend this front part here on the bow, I believe, of the boat. I looked it up. As well as do this kind of covering portion on the front here. So before I add any raw clay to my baked clay, I need to make sure I get all of that sandy clay dust off of here, just to try and help avoid any potential issues that it might cause getting in the way. More clay adhesive, of course, and then to fill this front cavity, I'm going to take some aluminum foil and just kind of smoosh it and compress it into roughly the shape of this kind of front cavity portion of the boat. And if you watched my tree snail diorama video, you're well aware that I am not a huge fan of aluminum foil. I'm a fan of it for its usefulness and various purposes and saving clay and reducing weight, but I don't really like messing with it. I don't like the feel of it, and I'm really scared of foil cuts. So, you know, I'm a little biased against it just for personal reasons, but it's great stuff. It's wonderful, super handy, especially in situations like this. And yeah, so filled that cavity, got it coated in more clay adhesive so that everything sticks together really well, and entirely encased that in polymer clay. And then once I had that more or less the way that I wanted it, I could throw it in the oven and we can finally start talking about the snails. So these are the shells that I chose for our Phantom and our Christine. I really liked this shell for the Phantom because it has some damage and defect to it, which felt fitting for his character, and this shell for Christine because it, you know, it's kind of feminine. I think it'll match her dress nicely. As per usual, I filled the shells with polymer clay adhesive and added some clay in there just to make sure that the internal structures of the shell are as supported as I can possibly get them. And also this little wire piece to work as an anchor for securing it to the body of the snail. Just like always, for our snail body, I'm going to use some more of this polymer clay, and this is a fresh piece cut from the block, so it is pretty stiff. It needs quite a bit of smushing and hand warmth to kind of get everything softened up to make it easy to work with. The body of the snails are pretty much always the same process. I'm going to make kind of a thick, chunky worm and smoosh it down to a flat surface to create that smooth, flat sort of underbelly, technically the foot of the snail. From there, I'm going to check that I like the fit and the proportions with the shell that I've chosen, and then kind of further refine the pose from there once I've got the basic body shape and size down. Now, snails don't have hands, as you probably know, but we do need this guy to be able to hold the pole that he kind of pushes the boat along with. So we're going to have to kind of use our imaginations and kind of figure out where something hand-like might be on a snail. That way he can have a similar pose to what he does in the film, while still not having hands, unfortunately, because he's a snail. But that's okay. He gets by. He perseveres, and he gets that boat where they need to go. So I checked the fit in the boat, and then we're going to kind of rinse and repeat for Christine here with making her body. Her pose is much simpler because she's just kind of chilling in the boat and singing. So, a little less mental work has to go into figuring out how her posing is going to go. But before we get too much further into this, I should warn you guys, I did make a mistake, unfortunately, while I was working on this piece. And that mistake was that I made their faces. And, their faces were great. I think the sculpt was great for their faces, but unfortunately, I left them in the oven too long. And they got a little dark, but that's okay. All we're going to do is kind of rough them up and sand them a little bit. That way they can still stick just fine. And, luckily this is a small piece that's going to attach to a larger piece. It's not going to threaten any structural integrity or longevity or anything like that. It's just going to look really weird and kind of off-putting and not quite match with what we got going on. So bear with me while we look at these horrifying faces for a moment. Don't worry, they'll get painted, it'll be okay. I did also make some more adjustments to our boat, added a little platform here to give him a little lift so it's a little bit more similar in appearance to our iconic image. And then we're going to shove some wires in their eye holes. I won't make you watch it. And then figure out getting that pole made for him. It's just, I just used like a wooden kitchen skewer. Worked pretty well for that. I think it's called a push pole. And then I used my ball tool to make the texture around the edges of the snail foot. And lastly, make sure I like all of my posing before I stick it in the oven and cement everything in place. Next, I can put a layer of clay adhesive and a thin layer of raw clay on here so that I can start working on my skin texture as well as my clothing. For that skin texture, I'm going to use these stamping tools that I made. It's just kind of a noodle of clay with a little shape on the side that I like to use various different kind of sizes to make some variation in the skin texture. I use these same tools in my previous videos for Hannibal and Will Graham, as well as for Walter White and Jesse Pinkman. So if you haven't checked those out and you want to take a peek, that'd be pretty cool. I did not use them for the strawberry snail, but it also came out really well. So if you want to, check that one out too, that'd be pretty swell. Anyways, so once I got kind of the bodice of her outfit done, I baked it to kind of lock that in so I didn't have to worry about smooshing it while I worked on the eye stalks. Pretty much the same recipe for those as well. A little bit of polymer clay adhesive, a little bit of polymer clay, a little smoosh and finesse until I get it the way that I like it. I'm going to use my tool to kind of shape the eyes here. I've really been liking doing these kind of recessed, more humanoid eyes as opposed to the glass eyes that I used to make for them, which were just kind of like a sphere, but we don't need to get into that right now. To adhere her to the bottom of the boat, of course, more polymer clay adhesive, and then rather than building up her skirt in just polymer clay, I put some foil down and then built up the clay on top of that, much like we did with the front of the boat. Now I wanted to try something a little bit different here for her like kind of lacy shawl over jacket, I don't know what you call it, thing that she has. So I took an actual piece of lace and rolled it into the clay. This did come out much more of a like subtle effect than I really wanted. I think me kind of poking and touching and smoothing things out diminished the texture a little bit. It's definitely still visible, but Things to keep in mind for next time. Gotta make it a more dramatic effect so it holds up well to my poking and prodding and the layers of paint and things that are gonna go over it. Now, of course, our Phantom needs his cape, and I did some bits where it's kind of like literally bunched up clay to try and make some folds, as well as just using some kind of noodly bits to build up thicker areas, leave thinner areas, try and make it so that those thicker areas are in the spots where the fabric would be gathered if this was an actual piece of fabric that he was wearing, and keep things thinner on the areas that are going to be more kind of stretched out over the form of our snantum, if you will. Of course, we've got to have that dramatic collar on his cape, and I made sure to leave a little spot for the kind of front claspy bit. I don't know what that's called. Once everybody's got their clothes on, they need their hair. I decided to focus on Christine's hair for this because it's the more involved of the two. I didn't even bother shaping the back of her head because I knew she was going to have so much hair. She's got quite a mane in this movie version that I'm using as reference. So I decided to just use polymer clay to kind of bulk out the general shape of her hair. I texturized that as well, just in case anything showed through, which it didn't. There's so many little coils that I made. Just these long tapered noodles of clay that I curled into little ringlets and then attached to her head. I made a bunch of these little coils and kind of just saturated her entire head with them, really making sure that I press them securely to the surface of her hair kind of form that's underneath, while also trying to retain as much of that coil shape as possible. After I've got everything kind of placed the way I want it, I'm going to use a small ball tool to go through and really make sure that those are all connected, get kind of in between the little loops and curls where I've left gaps, and kind of kept some closer together and pulled some further apart just for that kind of more natural variation, and to add a more, I don't know, hair-like texture to her hair. Now that our snails are pretty far along, we're going to go back to working on the boat. Now, I have these frame molds that I bought years ago for a purpose that I didn't actually end up using them for, but I have them, and they have some really nice little filigree details that I thought might make my life a little bit easier, because I can keep things symmetrical on either side of the boat without too much of a headache. So I just pressed some clay into the mold very carefully after I had kind of warmed it up and softened it up with my hands. I'm going to cut off this excess that I don't need here and kind of stretch it and form it to kind of fit my needs. Of course, more clay adhesive, and very gently so that I retain as much of that shape as possible. I'm going to press it onto the surface of the boat. After I'm happy with the positioning, I can use my tools to kind of further define and refine the shape and make sure that it fits the shape of the boat the way I want it to, kind of fill in those little gaps where there's lacking designs, and just kind of fix up the areas that I might have smooshed from pushing it into place. Of course, our Phantom must have a mask, so I've got this lovely pancake made for him with a very convenient little eye hole, and I'm gonna just smush it onto his face and cut it to fit, because Lord knows if I tried to cut it and stick it on there first, it would be a much more difficult endeavor. Now that our Phantom's funky face is, sealed away, we can get back to the boat and make sure that we have our headlights to light the way as we navigate those questionable waterways under the Opera House. So I dug out a little hole and made some wire pieces that I could stick down in there. I further secured them with some thinner wire and some clay adhesive and some clay to make sure everything's gonna stay stuck. And the front of the boat has this like skull motif on it in the film, and I figured the most analogous thing that a snail has is probably a shell, so I went with a shell. After that, I gave everything a base coat in the color that I wanted the shadowy areas that are going to inevitably peek through to be. Her over shawl thing, I did some puffy paint to kind of add texture where I had lost it previously. Gave a little variation in his cloak, even though it's mostly black, I just didn't want it to be black on black. The boat got a little bit of touches of green here and there, as well as, of course, that silver for the details. And then once all of the painting was totally 100% dry, it got a clear coat of water-based polyacrylic to seal everything in and give it a nice glossy shine, because snails got to stay hydrated. Oh, and don't forget the lanterns, of course. Now, we can't have a boat without water, and we're going to just pretend that this water is nice, clean, clear water. So, of course, I used UV resin for this. I first used just clear UV resin straight out of the bottle to kind of build up the basic shape and outline that I wanted for the water form underneath the boat. Once I liked that shape, I zapped it under the UV light and then mixed up a little bit more UV resin with some shimmery mica powder to start building up some kind of foam and ripples and things around the boat to give it a gentle motion look. Of course, every snail needs their slime, and then I also did a clear UV resin layer on their eyes before painting the irises and pupils this time. It worked out a lot better, no air bubble problems whatsoever. I, of course, had to make a little rose with a black bow around it for Christine, and then at this point I thought I was done, and, well, do you see it? No tentacles. I completely spaced giving them their tentacles. How are they going to smell the disgusting water that they're floating in? So they've already been painted and sealed at this point. So what I ended up deciding to do is taking a tiny little piece of UV resin that I cured. It's about the size of a grain of rice. I super glued that into place on either one of them. And then once that was totally dry, I could build up the shape a little bit further with some UV resin, make sure it blended into the face nicely, repaint and reseal their faces. And with that, they are finished. You know, sometimes weird things like that happen. It's really important that you just kind of take a deep breath and learn to roll with it and make the best of it and try to figure out a solution to the problem. Fun fact, I once forgot to put a shell on a snail, made the whole thing, painted, sealed, thought I was good to go, went to take pictures, and realized it wasn't even a snail. It was a slug at best. And of course we love our slug cousins. I've made a few of them as well, but that just wasn't the intention. So, you know, sometimes it happens. Sometimes your brain skips a beat and weird things happen and you got to learn how to problem solve and make the best of it. It's part of the process. But in the end, I think these turned out really great. I'm really happy with them, even with the hiccups along the way. I really don't think anyone would ever guess that their faces were burnt or that I forgot to put the tentacles on until the very end. So, well, I mean, now they will, because, you know, if you've seen this video, you know. But anyway, I think they turned out really great. I'm really happy with how my first boat turned out. I think the lanterns came out really great, even though I was honestly quite worried about the structural integrity of having to make something so kind of tendrily and scary, but it came out really good. I love the snails. I think the likeness is really good. I definitely learned from my previous mistakes with the eyes and completely avoided any issues with that this time. And yeah, these are my Phantom of the Opera snails. I hope you guys like them. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any suggestions or things you'd like to see, I'm all ears down in the comments below. Thank you so much again, and you're awesome. See you next time. Bye!